Salutations, ladies and gentlemen, the Knife Raven here, back again with another video, and in today's video, I'll be taking a look at the second of my most recent acquisitions by Michael May. Now today, it will be a very interesting pattern, one that was originally designed by the late and great Little Mester of Sheffield, Trevor Ablett. Now, for those who don't know what a Little Mester is, my description is probably not the best, but a Little Mester is an individual artisan craftsman who makes traditional handmade pocket knives and pen knives, and it was mostly used as a Sheffield term. And if you've ever seen it, you may have confused it with Messer, which is the German word for knife. So Mester, Messer, there is a distinction between the two. Now, Trevor Ablett was a knife maker who left quite the legacy and is considered still one of the best Sheffield knife makers to this day. And after his passing, Michael bought some of his tools and still continues to use them to this day. But along with some of the tools that he bought, he also decided to incorporate a couple of Trevor's old designs. And these are time-tested patterns that Trevor invented, and Michael decided to adapt them and continue making them to continue on his legacy. One of those patterns was called the ergonomic. Now, this is the ergonomic. What exactly is an ergonomic? Well, the term itself, which I'm sure we all know what that means, the ergonomic as a phrase means it is something that is comfortable, that isn't cumbersome or unpleasant to hold, something that is designed well, something that feels nice in the hand, in the case of a knife, that is. And ergonomic would suggest a certain level of ease of holding and use. Now, this is a broad spectrum, as everyone has a different size of hand, everyone has a different size of, grip. Certain people like holding knives right at the pivot, some prefer to hold them like this, and really, that makes you ask, what is the most ergonomic style of knife for anyone? Big hands, small hands, anything in between? Well, we may never find the answer to this question, but this particular knife is an attempt at making, well, a knife that is ergonomic. And I must say, it's quite an interesting pattern. You will not see this really anywhere else. This definitely isn't an American pattern. You aren't going to see Case or GEC pumping these out. It's definitely a Sheffield exclusive as of now, and it's a very interesting design, incorporating a primary lamb-foot blade here, and again we have the satin finished carbon for the steel here. This is 01 tool steel. And before I get into the fit and finish, again, this knife came with a little pamphlet, Michael May Knives Limited, handmade in Sheffield. Each knife is crafted to the highest standard from carefully chosen materials. Since learning my craft, I feel a responsibility to maintain the skills and artistry that made Sheffield famous. Michael May, your knife. The pattern is an ergonomic. The blade steel is 01 carbon. The handle material, although it just says walnut here, is Black American Walnut. And the date of production is April 23rd, 2023. Signed Michael May. And there is his website, his email, and his address in case you wish to contact him or get a knife made. It's very nice. Now, the knife itself is, well, very unique and very, very special in my book. When I first saw this, I immediately thought this is what I would imagine a UK legal buck 110, 112 style knife to look like. What I mean by that is it has heavy brass bolsters, it has dark wood scales, and a utilitarian satin finished blade with a fair point and, well, a longer cutting edge. Now, because this has to be UK legal, and the UK's knife laws are anything but, how shall I put it, liberating, there are many, many restrictions regarding blade length and locks and what you can't have on your knife, and thus something along the lines of a buck 110 would most certainly not be allowed. And of course there is the, if you have a good reason for it, or whatever their clause is. I I'm still not going to say. The Buck 110 is not UK legal. However, this is, again, what I would picture if someone asked me to envision a UK legal version, except with a clip point. Now, the materials here are very, very nice. We have some nice thick slabs of brass here, which are polished up to a very nice mirror finish. You have the brass pins, the brass liners. You have what is presumably a carbon steel spring, and the 01 blade, which has file work leading all through the spring to the front of the blade and all the way to the very back of the knife. So again, very nice. I always appreciate the extra little touch that the file work or guillochage can offer. The blade is stamped with M. May, Sheffield, England. Blade play is non-existent, by the way. Transition from the blade to the spring is good, although there is a very small little line there, and you can see that is where the two meet. Gapping from liners to covers, non-existent. Gapping from liners to spring. Again, I will do the light test, holding it up to the light. And there is a very little bit of light shining through right around there. But aside from that, there are no real gaps to speak of on this. Very slight, but certainly not heavily plagued by such gaps. You can see very nice finish on the back. The handles, again, which are American Walnut, feature a very, very nice little grain pattern here. It's a very simple one-color wood, and I know that sounds odd, but there have been many previous wooden handles in the past that have contained, not even on the either side, but also in each individual piece, different colors ranging from, say, reddy browns to almost light pink. And when you look at walnut, walnut is a fairly reliable material where you're almost always going to get a similar color. Granted, there are exceptions, but you can rely on walnut to be a good, solid choice for both utility and for looks. Very nice. It accompanies immensely well with the sheen of the brass. The blade is pinchable, by all means. You can absolutely get it open with no issue, although there is a nail nick if you are interested. No visible half stop here, although it feels like once you open it, there's a bit of a bias to here. So maybe a lazy half stop, but certainly not a snappy, noticeable one. Blade pull, I would rate at about a 6, maybe 5, 6. And here, probably about the same, 5 or 6. Definitely not as strong as the lambfoot I got in bog oak. This one I would give an 8 to the opening, 7 or 8, and then the closure would be probably closer to a 6. So I was surprised. I would have thought this one would have been lighter pull, but nope, this one is actually. Once open, again, the spring is very flush, which is unfortunately not what you can say in the closed position, as one small little issue I have noticed here is the spring is proud by a hair. I'm not going to be terribly picky and say that that bugs me too much, because it really doesn't become an issue unless you run your finger along it like this, because then your finger will catch and you will notice it now. But just doing this, you can't really tell that there's any raise here at all. So I'm not terribly bothered by that, but I could see how something like that could drive someone mental. Centering is perfect, although I'm sure you can already tell based on the curve of the blade there's something a little bit off here, and I will discuss that in a moment. But the tip centering itself is perfect. Blade wrap is non-existent on this knife, partially due to the slightly extended tang, which would hit the liner before the blade would, and also due to the very deep handle here, the blade just kind of disappears, and really, there's no way that this is going to get blade wrap. So, nothing to worry about in that regard. Looks like there's just a little hair here. Let me get that out. All right. Now, one thing that I have noticed is the lamb foot profile on the Ergonomic is significantly less pointy than the normal lamb foot. Now, it's never really been fully decided what the proper lamb foot is. There is the Taylor's Eyewitness kind of just gentle curve lamb foot, which admittedly is quite close to this. And then there's the more Arthur Wright-esque or Joseph Rogers aggressive curve down, kind of tapering into an incredibly sharp tip. And you can see these are made by the same maker, and there is a difference in how these are made. This one is very sharp, whereas this one is just fairly sharp. It's not nearly as pointy as this one. And this is a consistent thing I've noticed. I'm almost thinking that he uses two different styles of lamb foot for these knives. You can also see that while the blades are similar, the Ergonomic one is slightly bigger. Which brings me to my next point. Blade length and overall dimensions. Well, as I said earlier, this is a UK legal knife, and the blade is coming in just under 3 inches. Hold this up so you can see it better. You can see that it's just a hair under, but it is. This is not quite 3 inches. The cutting edge comes in at just around 2 just under 2 3/4. So this is by no means a small blade, but it is definitely a legal blade. Handle which is kind of hard to measure due to the curved bolster here. You're looking at about 3 3/4 on the handle, and an overall length of just about, 6 3/4 inches. So by no means is this a small knife. Here, I'll line it up next to the plain bog oak lamb foot jack. You can see that there is a substantial difference. They're definitely both within the same realm. This isn't a gargantuan piece, and this is no fifth pocket penknife, but you can see there is quite a bit of space in between the two. Here, I'll compare it with one of my most frequently featured knives, that being an Arthur Wright Ettrick. And the Ettrick's handle is almost the same, perhaps being slightly bigger, but again, you can see the blade is significantly shorter. But it's actually not that far away from the Ettrick in dimensions. Now, I've gone this whole review, I've talked about the steel, which is 01, by the way. Again, very good steel. It's definitely not, super steel, but it's better than the average C70. You have nice brass, making the knife weighty, and you have these beautiful bits of walnut wood. Now, this knife is visually appealing, but there are some issues underneath it. Now, this is the part of the review that is a little difficult. Now, normally I don't frequently reshoot videos. I don't do take 1, take 2, take 3. But this was one of those knives where it was a little hard to do a video on. And the reason is because I am torn, as I love this knife, but there are some significant issues with it that I could not help but showcase. And, well, even though I like this knife, don't let that get in the way of your judgment. Now, the main flaw with this knife is its unevenness. Now you can see that right here. This bolster, it's better if I just hold it like that. This bolster is significantly, well, maybe not significantly, but enough that you'll notice. That is taller than the bolster on the right. And why that is, I don't know. Flipping it around, you can see the same issue. You can see that this side is taller than this one, and there's actually very noticeable unevenness back here due to this, well, bad geometry. Now, this is by all means something that if you saw this on a production knife, so something made in a factory, a Spyderco, a Benchmade, I think most people would be kind of furious because, well, how could you let that happen? How could you let a knife just become completely asymmetrical for no reason whatsoever? Well, in the case of a factory-made knife, I could completely understand that. And really, the only thing I can use to defend this knife, and thus Michael May, is, and I know you can make fun of me for it, it's the fact that this is a completely handmade knife by one craftsman, and how he sands out the parts individually, shapes them by hand, sharpens them, well, sharpens the blade by hand, cuts the wood, puts the pins in, does the hand filing. Everything here is done completely in-house by hand. And I would like to specify this is no excuse for poor quality. And this is a discussion that I think needs to be had with many makers, many companies, and just generally the knife community as a whole. Flaws really are in the eye of the beholder, to an extent. I mean, if your knife's back spring just breaks off, at that point, if someone goes around and says, oh, that's not a flaw, there's nothing wrong with my knife, well, at that point, they're just an idiot. I'm sorry to say. But I think that there has to be a distinction between what you're willing to pay for, what's valuable to you, and what the maker is willing to offer. Now, this knife was by no means cheap. This was no Arthur Wright. This was no case. It was a bit more than a case. It's definitely within the GEC realm, at least GEC before it sold on eBay for $500. And this is definitely, to most people, a premium knife. This isn't cheap. This isn't budget-friendly. It's not an Opinel. It's not a Rough Rider. And because of that, you would expect a certain degree of quality, care, and finish. And on the other hand, one could argue, well, it's not a $500 custom. It's not a factory-made, machined knife. And yes, that is true. So the real question that I have for everyone, and really just, I have even this question for myself, how much are you willing to tolerate for levels of quality and lack of before it becomes either a waste of money or something that irritates you every time you take that knife out? Now, this is why I think it's based on the individual more than anything else. Because to some people, gaps are the most serious thing to find on a knife. If you find even the slightest gap on your knife, and you're one of these people, a gap to you could ruin your knife. And I understand that. I'm not trying to belittle you or say that because you hate gaps, that means you're wrong. No, by no means. I think that gaps are quite considerably annoying, and I'd rather not ever see them. Even so, if I have a knife with gaps, I'm not going to immediately discount it and say it's a terrible knife, and every time I take it out, I stare straight at the gap and think that, oh, this is a terrible knife because it has a gap. Now, there are some who think that blade wrap is the biggest sin that a knife could ever commit. That when the blade closes and hits the edge, and when you open the blade and there's a little chip running along said edge, that is just the immediate sign of a terrible knife. There are those who think that raised pins, that bad transitions, that choppy nail nicks, that shoddy stamping, everyone has their own opinion on what defines a knife's quality and what might take away from that quality. Now, for me, I have a personal bias against, well, bent blades. Now, I don't know how well you can see that. There is a bit of a bend there. Now, granted, in the closed position, yes, I will admit it. The tip is almost perfectly centered. But in the open position, you can see there is a significant, maybe not terrible, but definitely noticeable bend to the left. Now, to me, that is something that quite irritates me. I find it to be a nuisance whenever I see knives with offset blades. But what I've noticed that when I watch reviews, very few people talk about them. Now, I thought to myself, how is it that you can have such an irritating issue with a knife that no one talks about? And then I thought about it. I thought about it for quite some time. Perhaps it's just that no one else cares, and it's just me being weird. And that is very, very plausible, as I am quite peculiar. But it reminded me of something, that each and every person has their own definition of quality, and their own definition of the list of things that they look for on a knife, and the things that they want to see and the things they don't want to see. When someone buys a new knife, the first thing they might look at is the back. They want to see, are there gaps here? Are the pins raised? Are the bolsters, are they properly assembled? Is there any scratchiness in between the bolster and the cover? They might look for that immediately and then completely disregard blade play. They might never check to see if there's blade play. Then there are the others who will be furiously wiggling the blade to see, oh, is there even just the slightest little bit of blade play? I don't know if I can tell. There might be some. I might have to send it back. And I completely understand it. I know, outsiders look at us and think we're absolutely, insane, that we're basket cases, and we probably are, but regardless, everyone has their own definition of what bothers them and what makes them happy. Now this knife, and this is the original point that I was trying to go for before I went on a 5-minute long ramble, as I do, was that this knife, despite the flaws that you can so glaringly see, I really, really like this knife. And this is the reason that I couldn't upload the video yesterday, because yesterday, aside from just being less articulate, which, trust me, was a horror show, I found that it was difficult to describe the sensation of both loving a knife while also accepting the flaws and not being terribly upset about them. And as I was going, I was asking myself, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I should be more upset about this. Why are there these flaws on my knife? And really, why was this knife let out of the workshop? And I couldn't really come to an agreement really with myself. And because I couldn't come to a conclusion with my own thoughts, I couldn't really put it into words for you, the audience. But today, I think I have come to my conclusion on this knife. And really just handmade knives as a whole with flaws. I think that, and really this is my best way of answering it, and it's really a non-answer, but beauty truly is in the eye of the beholder. To some, this knife might be absolutely ugly. To some, it'll look weird, the blade shape is ugly, who'd want to carry this? And then to others, this might be a knife where they see it and they get their wallet and immediately want to buy one. And that's fine. Everyone has their own opinions. But to me, and this again, I'm not saying this is what you must believe, and I'm not telling you whether or not you should buy this knife, because to you, those flaws that you saw might have completely turned you off of purchasing one. But my opinion, and as this is sort of my review, it is my review, my conclusion on this knife is that at the end of the day, I'm going to carry this, I'm going to use it, I'm going to sharpen it once every month as I cycle out my knives quite frequently. And I'm going to enjoy it because I've enjoyed it for nearly a week already. And most of the time, when a flaw really bothers you, it gets worse over time. To me, this has become less of an issue over time. I've started looking past those uneven grinds and that offset blade. And really, I've just been focusing on, the handle, the wood grain, the feel in the hand, which, oh my goodness, I completely forgot to mention. This knife is called the Ergonomic, and, well, it is quite ergonomic. I think that people with smaller hands might have to hold it like this, but this is definitely living up to its name. So my sincere apologies for not mentioning that earlier. I shall put it in the description to make sure it isn't missed. But yes, this knife, it's comfortable, it's stylish, it is timeless. The little embellishments and just the soul this knife has, it's unlike anything that I have ever held from, Spyderco, CRKT, Kershaw, even other traditional knives, Rough Rider, Case. This has a feel that none of those have, and arguably, those knives are better. They don't have uneven bolsters. They don't often, well, depends on the day of the week, they don't have bent blades. But there's just something about this knife that I can't stop loving. I suppose a bit of a dark and somewhat comical analogy I can use for this knife is it's your son or daughter who goes down some dark paths in life and really makes some poor decisions, but at the end of the day, they're still your son and your daughter, and you'll love them even though they definitely have faults. We all have faults. And I'm not saying they're a good thing, I'm not saying we should encourage fault, but when you encounter something that kind of overrides that, when you still see a piece of quality craftsmanship that was lovingly made by a maker dedicated to his craft, I just can't hate this knife. I just can't find myself staring at this and thinking, that's a piece of junk. To me, I still look at this like a work of art. And that might take away my credibility as a reviewer. Fine, sure. That is okay with me, because I really didn't have any credibility to begin with. Now, my final conclusion to this really is just, if you think that you're willing to take the chance that your knife will get flaws, and you really want this knife, and you don't care if it has flaws or not, then absolutely, I'm not going to stop you. In fact, I'll encourage you, go buy one of these. Show Michael some support. And if you really are looking for a perfect knife, well, you might have to look elsewhere, because a knife like this, it was made by human hands, and, well, human hands tend to make mistakes sometimes. So I guess if you're looking for perfection, look elsewhere. But if you're looking for a knife with character and a soul, I would absolutely recommend you buy one of these. And yes, so if you managed to suffer through 27 minutes and 55 seconds of my rambling, well, thank you very much. I am quite grateful for that, as most people wouldn't sit through that kind of a lecture from me. So, again, if you've made it to the end of the video, thank you very much for watching, and for tolerating my rambles. I feel that it's my duty as an eccentric knife reviewer that I have to just speak my mind plainly. And this review was the opportunity to discuss something that, again, it's meant a lot to me. The idea of knives and their quality being based on personal opinion and belief. And at the end of the day, reviews themselves will never truly be able to help you make up your mind, because at the end of the day, someone can say that a knife is amazing. Some people can say that a knife is terrible, and really, you'll never know until you buy it, you hold it in your hand, you carry it in your pocket, and you get to know it. And really, until you can do that, there is never going to be a review that will completely make up your mind for you. At the end of the day, it's your choice, and, well, at least for me, I think that this is a good choice. As long as you're willing to accept the fact that there might be little faults, I would completely recommend you buy this knife, or just any knife from Michael. He makes some very attractive knives. Again, another example being this lambfoot here. So, thank you very much for watching. This has been a very unique pattern that you'll probably see more of, the Michael May / Trevor Ablett Ergonomic in Black American Walnut and 01 Carbon Steel. And this is the Knife Raven, as always, signing off. Goodbye.